This is something that helps me in the moment when I'm having a flashback. This is something that can be done by any human being as long as you're capable of forming thoughts in some way. So for me, I have a TBI that affects my iconic memory. So I have aphantasia. My ability to form images in my mind does not work. I can still do this therapy. It's just a verbal repetition. You may recognize parts of this exercise from Imaginal exposure therapy or even EMDR. Basically, this exercise is good to use when you're in the moment, literally having a flashback. I'm going to go through a few examples since I know the brain's typical way of processing information is to discard what isn't immediately useful. And it can be easy to trip yourself up if you can't suddenly think of something. The goal isn't to be as realistic as possible, but rather something you can live with. For me, a lot of my flashbacks revolve about interpersonal violence, being restrained and immobile. For me, I have an internal protector. I'm diagnosed with DDNOS, who I named James. When the flashback starts, I imagine that James comes through the door, knocks out my aggressors, undoes the restraints, wraps me in a blanket, whisks me to safety. The components are important. You want enough components in your replacement that you can focus on thinking about them, so little details help. I imagine him going through each step of undoing the ties, unfolding the blanket, wrapping it around my shoulders, picking me up, the aggressors falling over, all of that. Let's say you aren't comfortable having another person come in. You could instead imagine that they suddenly had brain aneurysms and fell over. And as you worked on the ties, they gradually came loose. You extracted yourself. You found a warm blanket, got to your house, made hot chocolate. Or let's say it wasn't interpersonal violence, but instead something completely out of human control, like a natural disaster. You could imagine that suddenly the events began to happen backwards, in reverse, until you are alone and safe in your apartment the previous day. It turns out that you had a premonition. So you can imagine yourself packing up all of your belongings and then evacuating before the disaster occurs. The point is to focus on each individual step. This is not a one and done thing. The flashbacks can be repetitive and recursive, so it's important that you do it every time you begin to have a new occurrence of a flashback. It takes me about a half an hour to an hour to fully combat an episode, so if it doesn't immediately work the first time, don't get discouraged. I hope that this can be of some help, and as always, have a great day.